visible in Uganda, place itself, let the people of Uganda know what they are doing, let the people of Uganda know why they should save for retirement.
If you were to ask me, what should UBRA's next 10 years focus on? I would say that UBRA's next 10 years should be to now build this 20 trillion asset base that has been generated, should actually be able to ensure a comfortable life in retirement for all members who are in the retirement schemes. But UBRA should also then allow and come up with mechanisms to support the players to be able to onboard all the smallholders, all the informal sector to come in and secure their retirement by participating and joining the licensed pension schemes in the market.
And so my thinking is that we need to support the institution, particularly Parliament of the Republic of Uganda needs to support resource mobilization for allocation to the authority so that the authority can continue with the widening the coverage.
People now, instead of keeping money in boxes, will keep here, and it is in the financial sector, and it's easy to tap in. And the cost of money will go down, but our investment in the country will go high. And I can tell you, if we make very good regulations, we will have the support of Parliament.
I believe that the next 10 years are quite pivotal. We've gone through the best building of the industry, and right now we are at the point where we have to be tasked with generating value for our clients and exhibiting relevance over the next 10 years. I'm very, very confident. In fact, I'm really proud of the work that has been done for the last 10 years, and my imagination runs wild. What is possible for the next 10 years.
And the other key achievement that or work in progress that UBRA is trying to do, which I again encourage different stakeholders in this sector, particularly Parliament, to support UBRA, is the coming up with a national micro pension scheme. Uganda is, our economy is largely informal, and even within the cities, we have so many people who are operating informally, and yet they earn income, either daily, either weekly or monthly. They earn income in one way or the other. But if not well guided, and I think this particular scheme, the micro pension scheme, would again help reorganize our people in the formal sector. Because if you are in our market today, if you're a road vendor today, if you're a hawker today, if you're a border today, if you're a fisherman today, you still have that energy to go nearly every day in the waters and do fishing, to go to Nakawa market every morning to pick tomatoes, vegetables. But that strength with time, as years come by, begins to dwindle. That means the same basket that you can carry now, you are not able to carry in the next 5 years or 10.
So our focus, what really keeps us awake when I wake up in the morning, that drives my day, protection of members' funds.
So what I see going forward for the next 10 years is an organization that is efficient, that is creating value for the benefits. Efficiency meaning when I contribute, I must be guaranteed that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, when I retire, my money will be there. And ensuring that the monies that I contribute are invested in assets that will make my money grow. Not just putting in 1 shilling, paid 1 shilling. When I put in 1 shilling, I should be paid 100 shillings at the end of 30 years. And that's the objective, and that's efficiency.
I think to the customer out there who might not even think they are a customer because you ride a border, you in retirement. And they can only look after you in retirement if you avail yourself now. And all they want to do for you is to make sure that when you hang up your boots, when I hang up this jacket in retirement, UBRA wants me to live a fulfilled life, a life bereft of poverty, a life of joy and happiness. And UBRA works with people and different entities to deliver that. As service providers, I think we'd want to say congratulations again, UBRA. We feel the heat sometimes, but we are ready for the task.
As we celebrate, let's also remember that there are those who are not yet part of the saving culture, and we find ways of bringing. I wish you a happy celebration.
As we celebrate 10 years of service protecting retirement benefits in this country, allow me to thank the Board of Directors of Uganda Retirement Benefits Regulatory Authority. You have been very instrumental and very focused. Allow me also to thank the staff and management of UBRA. You have supported the cause. Allow me also to thank my predecessors, the first interim CEO, Mr. Moses Bekabyo, the Chief Executive Officer, my immediate predecessor, Mr. Bonyi David Nyekondi, the government of Uganda who have supported us, providing us with all the resources that we need from the day UBRA started up to now, the regulated entities, the stakeholders, the fund managers, the custodians, the administrators. Without you, we would not be talking of structures of governance in this market. And of course, the members who are saving, who have trusted us, who have continuously saved with the different schemes. Allow me to assure you that as we deliberate on this direction for the next years, may God bless you, may God bless your families, may God bless our country, Uganda. Let us celebrate as we thank God.
Welcome to the CEO Bench. My name is Eddie Okela, and on this particular episode of the CEO Bench, we go to Noya district in northern Uganda to catch up with who is the visionary person behind Delta Education Collective, who is working with the community in this area to change the way we view primary education, with the view that every child given the best education can compete globally. Coming out of Uganda, and of course, we're going to dig into the story of how and what inspired her to get to where she is. Meredith, welcome to the interesting lighter notes of actually knowing you a little bit.
Well, that story starts when I was in primary school myself. I grew up in a little town outside of Boston in the United States, and there were two main things that I experienced when I was a primary school kid. The first one is that my town had a great public school, and every kid in my town had access to that school for free. And my mom was on the Parent-Teacher Association, the PTA, and supported and held accountable by the parents who were in that town. Sometimes the school wouldn't have enough money for something, but the parents wanted it to happen, so they would raise it among themselves as part of the PTA. And sometimes the school would do something that was not what it should be, or the results came back and they weren't what it should be, and the parents would put pressure on the school and hold it accountable. And I saw that in action growing up, and again, just sort of thought that that was status quo for everyone. And another thing that I saw in my very privileged, very wealthy, very white town growing up is that money doesn't buy happiness. And it for sure, as I have learned in my life, can make things easier because than that, and that's what I was looking to find and pursue.
And we want to know you from the ancestry point of view and building to where you are today.
Grew up in a sort of farming community outside of Kansas City, and my mom, her parents are actually British, and she was
like in Africa we say it takes a village to raise a child. We don't know whether that's the same case in America. Would you take us through?
I was the young Uganda. My parents only had and only wanted 2 children, my dad worked and my mom stayed at home and raised us full time. My dad was an international lawyer. He was very passionate about it. My mom felt like her responsibility and her purpose was raising us into being great citizens. And her responsibility, she wanted to also support our development in exposure. And she thought of that about 2 things. One of which was seeing the world, taking us on different adventures and showing us what is out there, and making us feel like global citizens. So we got a lot more exposure than a lot of people have access to here, again, going back to privilege and financial resources. But then she also thought an important aspect of exposure was seeing the people living in our own backyard who didn't have as much as we did. So we did a lot of volunteering in...
Meredith, the show looks at, or this program looks at leadership. I want to start from a very light note. To you, what is leadership to you?
That's a great question. I've heard a lot of different definitions, but I would say my coach and support. I have, personally, the way that I think about leadership is that my responsibility, out the supervising and working on, and just stand in the background and support, and they're really...
Wow, and on that note, you've talked about self-leadership. What is self-leadership to you?
Structure. And so what that means is, as an organization, we don't have a hierarchical structure. We don't have a boss and then managers and then, What that means is, as an organization, we don't have a hierarchical structure. We don't have a boss and then supervisors and then field team. We think of ourselves as a forest, and in a forest, there's no boss. There are trees and there are birds and there's butterflies and every or you're supposed to be over there, because everyone is managing themselves. And in the complex systems that exist in our global world and the amount of change that we have to constantly be able to adapt to.
Wow. On that note, we've talked about leadership and self-leadership rating. I want to take you straight to one of the things that, and the global impact of what you're starting to do in Uganda. What inspired you to start Delta Education Collective as one, and owned the plans for education in Uganda? It does exist of education for everyone. We talked about education for all the children, but actually when you look at it down, it's not the case. So how does your vision impact, how does things start? Could you give us a context of how you started this whole thing?
Eddie, that's a great question, but it has lots and lots of parts. So I focused on community development. And I had a great professor there, Professor Partridge, who just harped on and on about how whatever you do, make sure that the people who are benefiting from whatever you're working on are the ones in the decision-making position about how these resources are being spent, how this model is being designed. And I took that to heart, but it also just made very logical sense to me that, of course, the people on the ground are the people who know what they're doing and what could solve their challenges. And I was confused about why he just kept coming back to this and kept coming back to this until I moved into the field of international development and saw, I learned 3 important things in that 6-month period of my first job. The first one, we left all of the answers to the test that we were taking that day on the board because we'd been going over them the day before. And then I collected all the tests and saw that most of the kids had failed the exam anyways. And that is when I developed just like a heartfelt, deep appreciation for the superpower of teachers and realized that that's not where my superpowers lie necessarily. And then the second thing I learned is how unfair education is around the world. That if I compare the education that I got for free in my little town in Massachusetts to the education that was available in the townships outside Port Elizabeth in 2004 in South Africa, it was just chalk and cheese. You couldn't compare them. There weren't really books in the classrooms. It was really hard for the kids to get to those classrooms. We did actually have running water on the grounds of the school, and we did have some government support for life in our lives. If we're expected to support our families and have our kids have a better life in the future than we inherited ourselves, what does that look like? How do we do that? And I realized we need some way to make an income to support our family, access to very high quality. And without those 3 things, people just can't be expected to thrive. And sure, ones will every once in a while, but really when I got the passion for some sort of systemic approach to improving education, because I knew if we could educate people, then they would take care of having doctors in their communities and also figuring out ways to make great livelihood.
Do you think that you are achieving this mission since you started? And in this particular one, I want to look at the Delta's mission to transform education through community-driven initiative. How do you cross from South Africa then to Uganda. I mean, East Africa, Southeast Africa. How did you cross from there? And then what's the journey like from here? What's the context of this journey?
South Africa, and they couldn't take interns that summer, and I needed an internship that particular year in 2005 in order to graduate from university on time. And so I reached out to a bunch of friends. One of them was in Uganda. She said, yeah, come here. And I said, great, where's Uganda? Sure. They rented them out in order to get some money to finish up the hotel. Uganda is now my forever home. I'm here, I'm home. And so my mom is a wonderful mother and said, okay, if you really love this place called Uganda and you're gonna stay there, I wanna come and see you, come and make that decision, whatever. So we went on a little trip around the country and I showed her all the things that I love about being here for a party dinner. Glad you did that. And I looked at my mom and I was like, you came to see why Uganda is the best place in the world, not to bring me back. And she just sort of smiled at me. And then 2 weeks later again, I was on a plane back here. And yeah, I just love it here. And my passion for education started in South Africa, but it blossomed here. And I realized I could have an incredible lifestyle and life here without compromising on some of the security and safety constraints I experienced in South Africa. Yeah. So my passion since then has been to try and figure out what it looks like to revolutionize the quality of our primary education system, because it is so fundamental to our development play.
Well, you are on the CEO Bench. My name is Eddie Okela, and on the show today in this particular discussion is a lady who has been in Uganda by love and by passion. Meredith, we're going to take a break. And when we come back from this break, we want to look at community-centered approach and the global relevance of the program you're trying to do in Uganda. And how do we get other people to be part of it? How do This is the CEO Bench. Welcome back from that break. And on the program today, we're talking to a lady known as Meredith Bates, who is the founder and the person pushing the agenda behind the community education in Noya District. She's on the program today, and we are talking about leadership, vision, and mission. And how do we get these things to be known to everyone across the country? Now you went back to the US, and then coming back, and how the whole dream started. I like the fact that your mother can be adopted and scaled. And how can it be a sustainable educational movement that can improve the Ugandan education system and give opportunity to the young people in primary school, particularly in less privileged areas of education we're looking for.
I think what you bring up is so prescient that everybody in the community has to be working towards the same thing, but also everybody in the country has to be working towards the thing. But also education inequality is a global challenge that we're all facing. 70% of 10-year-olds coming out of COVID read and understand a basic sentence. 70%. So what that means is that any one of us who's listening that could do that at 10, we'd be in a different place on climate change, we'd be in a day that's available and possible today. We would all be prospering more if all of us had access to this education foundation. And I really come back to all the time just the concept of there but by the grace of God go I. We're all part of some sort of, that's not fair. And it doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't benefit us. So the country is driving towards, which is aligned with what the global goals and standards are driving towards, is so critical to all of that. So if you talk about the Millennium Development Goals, started in 2000, the focus on education there was the second goal, and it was universal primary education for everyone. And Uganda was actually ahead of the game on that with our UPE legislation that went into place in 1997. 91% of kids in low and middle income countries actually were present and enrolled, and is huge. Another thing is that the number of kids who are school aged who are out of school actually halved between the start of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Millennium Development Goals. And we made a ton of progress on gender parity and inclusive access to education. So the access piece, which is so critical for education, let's get kids into classrooms. We made so much progress on behind this goal that everyone was pushing towards. But what they realized in the process is that just having kids have their bottoms in seats in class for the next however many years is actually quality education. If these kids are sitting in school, how do we make sure that they're learning? And that filters beautifully down into the Ministry of Education and Sports vision, which is quality education and sports for all Ugandans. And that then trickles down into what we're trying to do as just a small fry in this whole big global ecosystem for quality and inclusive and equitable education, is quality education by and for all. And so for us, when we think about our model and how we measure it, it has 4 pieces. One is access by and for all. That for all is the access piece. How do we make sure that all kids are getting into the classroom? Because still today in Uganda, 50% of kids that start primary school don't finish it for lots of reasons. But then the second piece is quality education. So how do we make sure that when they're actually in their schools, they're learning what they need to learn to be competitive on this global playing field we're now playing on? And then finally, for Delta, this whole thing comes together when it's by all. When every single citizen actually plays our role, be it parents, be it students, be it teachers, be it local leaders from LC1 all the way to district chairperson, because we're only working in one district so far. Everyone needs to play their role, and if they do, it creates that ecosystem that supports able to achieve quality education. And so, for example, last year in 2023, we were able to, as a whole movement working in NOYA, bring back 800 students who had dropped out of school back into schools. And so that was really exciting. Now for quality education, how do we measure that? Mostly what we're looking at right now is primary leaving examination result, 176 from the bottom 5% to the bottom 20%. Huge jump in 1 year, and was an incredible job by the team on the ground. The second thing we look at is the number of kids who get a Division I, because that shows the number of kids who get access to a significant amount more opportunities and tips and ways of moving forward. We had 47, and in 2023 we bumped it up to 57. So the communities were ridiculously proud of what they had achieved. But it's not just the kids who perform excellently that we want to celebrate, it's making sure that all kids are benefiting from this. So the final piece that we look at is the pass rate. What is the percentage of kids who pass the primary leaving examination? And our district education officer looks at 1 through 3 as passing. He doesn't consider Division IV passing, even though sometimes at a national level we do. But in NOYA, if you look at 1 through 3, about 60% on average for the last 10 years have passed the national PLE exam. And in 2023, we bumped it up to 66%. So that may feel like a small increase, but in just 1 year, we look at for quality education is actually basic literacy and numeracy. And that takes additional resources to measure, but we hope to go into a second district in 2025 and set up that district so that we can actually do some rigorous research and testing around some universal metrics to use. And so literacy and numeracy is what we focus on for that.
Okay. Thank you very much. I want to just pick your mind. Very great stuff you're doing there. And from a leadership perspective, we look at change management. Obviously, you have been managing change. You've been managing change from the US community of affluent people, going through very good educations. One would expect you to have followed your dad to become a lawyer, become a serious person. And you managed this change to South Africa, from South Africa, to East Africa. And now we are here talking about it. Do they own this process? Do they feel like they're involved? Is it something, if a child is coming from this family, then I must make sure that this child goes to school, or we must make sure that these children in this community goes to school? How is it working?
Yeah. I appreciate that you call it change management, this process of creating ownership, because it doesn't happen overnight. It's a really slow process. But the other thing that we've actually been managing from the beginning is, I talked to a friend who's an expert in behavior change communication, and I was like, but how do you measure whether or not what you're putting out there is actually changing people's minds, and then that changing people's minds will actually change their behavior? And she said, we look at 3 things. How control? What sense of agency do you personally have over making that happen? Can you actually control the outcome? So sometimes after the pandemic, hope was low and likely everything was down, What we saw in moving from 2022 to 2023 is it was the first year that hope went up, likelihood went up, value and importance went up, and personal sense of agency went up. And so to see that the actual numbers are moving in PLE performance is really exciting for us to see. And to your point about the role of government, it's really hard for them and government and it's difficult. So this is where the role of civil society comes in, that we need to sort of activate the base and activate people to realize what our role is so that we can then collaborate with government and the decisions that they're making, and the policies that they're making, education reform, it can't be top down. But it also can't, and there are certain things that the government can do to help establish that. Because come out and say things like, your role is to make sure that you pay PTA fees if your school is saying, and you guys as a community agree that you need to do that. Or your role as a parent isn't just to send your Mzee and Mama say things. People listen and they do it. And so there are things that they can, encouraging and motivating that spark.
Well, this is a CEO Bench with Bet, and we are talking about Delta Education Collective right here on the CEO Bench, talking to her as the visionary person behind Delta Education Collective. She came up with the idea, sold it to the community, to the government plan, and to the global standards, and we're talking about what kind of support that would the community and of course our organization need. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about addressing the global and local educational challenges, borrow. Welcome back from the break. This is the CEO Bench, and on this particular episode of the program, we are talking to the founder and the lady behind the Delta Education Collective, found in northern Uganda, in Noya district. Put this together, and how would you think we can address it?
There have been a lot of challenges. We think that we need to solve. And what is so beautiful about this global challenge is that Uganda is just a perfect microcosm for looking at all the different things that can get in the way, especially in a low-resourced environment. And most of the environments where we are facing global education inequity, there are very few resources. But Uganda, as you know, is one of the fastest growing countries in the world with 50% in education. But then also 60% of 12-year-olds either can't read or can't do basic math. And that's also urgent. If most of our population is below the age of 15, we have to make sure that as many of them as possible are literate and numerate, and that's where our schools come in and are otherwise failing them. And then also, as we know, education doesn't live in a vacuum. It feeds our economy. And so the fact that 40% of us live on less than $2 a day is largely because of, or starts with, the lack of education foundation. And so we started in Noya district in particular because that's was at the time the 5th worst performing district in the country. And we figured, let's start where the challenges are highest. And we face a lot of challenges every day, but the communities have shown us that there isn't really a challenge that they can't open their communities. So what we're hoping to do is expand to a 2nd district in 2025, and then continue expanding to more and more districts. We work extremely closely with the district education officer under his wonderful leadership in Noya, and will continue to do so, working very closely with the government at a local level wherever we work. And then also at some point, resources and abilities and wisdom and skills, and they're hitting various ceilings. And if we're working in 2,000 schools, these 50 have said that their challenge is textbooks, or these ones have said it's classroom blocks, or these ones have said it's curriculum, or these ones have said it's teacher training or a UPE grant or whatever it is. Let's do some innovation pilots in collaboration with all these communities that are already doing their best in the schools, and bring all that data back to the ministry essentially as their R&D policy interventions. These are the things that are easy about these policy interventions, and to your point, these are the things that are really challenging in implementing these great ideas. How can we work together and actually see a national education transformation in the country?
So you talk about challenges and you talk about the creative ways that you already see by implementing this program is giving us, and you see a bedrock of where we can actually begin to pick some of the R&D and research and development that we need as far as education is concerned. Like these dropouts that you talked about, kids with very low literacy levels, what are the needs? Look into that. And then as well as give us, the success that you already have, if you measure it at this point. What is success rate looking like from where you start following right now? What is that one thing that you think if we do together, it will take us to the global world?
I think, and that's a pretty small amount of money that we're trying in Uganda from just working with your, pupils, teachers, SMC and PTA, local leaders, and getting those people together in your annual general meeting and saying, guys, what are the 5 things that we can do to most improve education in our school? Who wants to take the lead on each one today? So it just takes people having a really active citizen approach and having some support. So we can, if you want to do that in your community, let us know and we'll give you everything we know about what works and what doesn't. And essentially have like a community activist, community education activist in a box, like module basically, that says if you want to do this in your school, here's a manual about how you would do it, and maybe here's a social media group where you can share ideas and lessons and things that worked and things that didn't. So it's science, but it doesn't mean that it's easy either. It takes a lot of time and energy and effort, but you don't need an organization called Delta to do it. So we want to come up with this sort of manual that allows anybody to do it, be it in Uganda or in Brazil or in China or in the United States, wherever you are where you don't think that there's enough support or accountability in your community of your school, and that would help improve the outcomes. We want to provide support from whatever we've learned in our process. And so there's lots of different ways we could create that global network, but what I'm thinking about now is essentially like a Rotary International